Oh. All right, it's 6 p.m. on April 3rd. I'll call this Town Council work session to order. Ms. McKay, would you do a roll call, please?
Mrs. Amos?
Here.
Mr. Reed?
Here.
Mr. Dwyer?
Here.
Mr. Parrott?
Here.
Mr. Yolen?
Here.
Mr. Hunter?
Here.
Mr. Hardy?
Here. Thank you. Welcome to the folks who are here. Oh, look, we got somebody showing up. And the folks who are online. Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented at this time.
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Next item up is declaration of personal interest. Does anyone have a declaration of personal interest at this time concerning the agenda? Not hearing any, we'll roll into the finance report by the finance director, Ms. Julie Moore.
Good evening. You have the February charts and reports in front of you. So revenue should be about 67% since we're in month 8. And we're slightly below that. And that's because, as I've talked about in the past, we haven't recognized the ARPA money in the water and sewer fund, and we have that money budgeted. And we'll recognize that in June once we figure out exactly how much has been spent so we can recognize it. But I like to point out that the general fund is at 61%, so it's pretty close to where it should be. So that's always a positive. When you look at revenue compared to prior year, we are above where we were last year in every fund but the airport fund. And again, that's simply because last year we had some large projects, so we were getting a lot of state and federal reimbursements. And this year we don't have any large projects, so we're not getting those reimbursements, and that's why the revenue's down compared to last year. For expenses, well, we are well below the 67% of expenses compared to budget, so that's positive. Except there's still a few departments that are above, but if you look back, they're starting to shrink. So by the end of the year, I feel very confident that they are going to be below budget, especially the finance department. And then when you look at the expenses compared to last year, we are slightly above, and it's the same reasons I've explained in the past, but there's a couple of new things that we've paid that's made our expenses higher than last year. One of them was the ABM payment, and that was split between the general fund and the water fund, and a big chunk of it's in the water fund, so that's why those expenses are up. And then the transportation fund, we paid for 2 buses this year, and we hadn't paid for any at this point last year. So that's why those expenses are up. Do you have any questions on that?
Have any questions for Ms. Moore at this time?
And I'd like to tell you something else. So I want to let you know that we currently have gotten it down to 26 business licenses that have not been paid. So we've sent letters out telling them that they have to April 15th to make those payments. And if they haven't made them by then we're going to start the next steps in the process for operating without a business license. So that's all I have.
April 15th.
Yes, sir. You know,
All right.
lovely tax deadline.
That's right. Get it done. Any questions for Ms. Moore? Not at this time. All right, old business. First up is the proposed FY 2024-2025 town budget. Mr. Davis, you got any additional information on this?
We're loaded and ready for any questions.
Loaded and ready. We got any questions on the budget at this time? I saw the council retreat dollars were in the budget, and so just as a heads up, we will plan on doing another retreat after the prior 2 years. We'll do another one in the spring following the council elections. We'll revisit our strategic plan and our goals and go from there. I had a question for Mr. Davis about the small equipment under 5K under the horticulture category. It had bumped significantly, I think from like 7 to 47,000. And I was curious about that, but he informed me that that is going to be planters. Those square planters around town are going to get redone.
Yeah, the black box with the Farmville logo on them that are all up and down Main Street in different places, we're going to replace all of them. They've been around quite a bit. We've repainted them a few times, and so we're going to replace them with new ones.
And then urban heat mitigation. Do you have any information as far as what that involves?
So the majority of that is a grant from the Department of Forestry. And there was a study done through Longwood University, I believe, or Hampton-Sydney, or both. And the study showed that there were several areas in town that were needed heat mitigation because of lack of canopy and those type of things. And one of the main ones was in downtown was our parking lot right behind, beside South Street Conference Center and behind the courthouse. And so we put in for a grant through the Department of Forestry that will create heat mitigation tree islands in that parking lot.
Do you have any other questions for Mr. Davis at this time? I would say the only other question I had, and I addressed this at one point, one, just a point of reference, the Sarah Terry Trail, there's 20K in there for limestone, and that is to finish the trail on the Sarah Terry Trail, the actual hard packed gravel that's there, so that'll be nice. The other thing I noticed that caught my eye was just a recognition that the $350,000 that we gifted to the Farmville and Industrial Development Authority, right? And that perhaps, we can't really ask for that return, but
I mean, you can ask, they don't have to give it back.
But perhaps they could, invest that money wisely, similar to the way that we have invested money, and see some return there. Go ahead.
Ms. Moore and I have talked about that since our conversation. We would take that to the IDA board, and they would have to pass their own resolution approving that. I would share with them that they could use those proceeds to then have money that is more than they currently do coming in to help pay back the debt that they do owe the town prior. And then that money would still be there for another opportunity that may come that they could put in for a grant for, whether it's FDP or some other entity that wants to do something on Main Street or within to draw economic development to the community, that they have the means to do that. And so we're looking at VGIP, LGIP, same difference. It's just different acronyms, letters. LGIP, which has a little bit better of a return. But we'll bring that to them. We've got to schedule a meeting for them to talk about all those.
Okay, thank you. Outside of that, it felt like just cruising through that it was pretty even-handed. I saw lots of people getting, it was kind of an even distribution of equipment, trucks, that sort of thing. So it seemed like there were no favorites being played, which is always nice. And once again, recognition of the fact that no enterprise funds are being siphoned out for the general fund in this budget, which is a big thing. And so kudos to y'all for that. And for once again putting together what I think is an excellent budget in your pursuit of continuing to represent us well in the financial reporting and department. So thank you for those efforts. Not hearing any other questions. At this time, we will have a public hearing next week during the regularly scheduled council meeting for the budget. So if folks have any questions or concerns, please bring them to the table.
And
yes,
Mayor,
sir.
also, I mean, I'm open to any questions about the CIP as well. I mean, because that correlates with the budget. So if you want to offer that up as well to the council this evening, because your public hearing next week is the budget and the CIP.
Do we have any questions concerning the 5-year capital improvement program that has been given up? Not hearing it this time. I will
The
say,
majority of what's in the
Yeah.
CIP is, for the coming year, is in the budget.
I will say, in the CIP, it's good just to go forward for the next couple of years because you can see sort of the paving program for like the next 5 years and kind of lays out where that's going to transpire across town. So it's a good for when you're talking to constituents. You can give them a heads up when paving's coming their way. All right, we'll move on from that to old business B, which is ordinance 228, chapter 15, amending the parking meter division. Mr. Davis?
Yeah, I came to you all last month about needing, as we're updating the parking meters, that we really needed to revamp the ordinance. And so I took a stab at it and then sent it over to Mr. Elder for his review, who, as any good attorney, critiques it a little bit more. Thank you, Gary. And so what you have before you is what has been, and I did get the feedback from the police department as well, since they're the ones having to enforce it. So all of those entities have reviewed it, and this is what we would propose to you to move forward in changes. If you so desire to do that, this would be a public hearing in May, at the May regular meeting. And then you would vote on it up or down at that time. And then it would go into effect, obviously, following after that.
Do you have any questions concerning the parking meter
I'd like to
ordinance?
suggest maybe possibly posting it on our social media so that the average person can see what we're proposing.
Well, when we advertise it, we do post that they can receive a copy. It's the size of it won't fit on social media, as far as the length. But they can always request a copy from us, and we have to provide it, and we would.
I'd just like for somebody to point out to them, pay attention to what the fines are, so that they don't get these tickets, because they're going to realize that it's not cheap when you get a ticket in the town of Farmville.
Yes, parking fines are going to go up. You're looking at parking fines, $50 if paid within 15 days, after which is a $100 fine. So that was, to your point, Mr. Perry, we had that discussion, but that is going to be the one meat of this that will raise concern, and most often those concerns come post passing of such an ordinance.
I would like to point out also, there is language in there about after not paying, I can't remember off the top of my head, 3 or more unpaid or otherwise unsettled parking violations, the motor vehicle will be immobilized or towed.
Which I understand. I think we have a few folks who have collected quite a few and have not paid at this point. So having a mechanism that, perhaps incentivizes them to pay up before they collect a glove box worth of parking permits or parking citations.
Is that retroactive on the tickets that they've already got? Like if they've got, when we do this, I didn't get deep in the weeds on that. But if we do this, if they've got 5 tickets out there already and they park, can we and they're illegal, are we gonna be able to do them there, or are we gonna have to wait for the next 3 tickets?
I would say it would have to be after this ordinance is enacted.
Okay.
Not,
Just curious.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Elder, but I think because it's a new law, then it's whatever is enacted after this one.
All right. Any other questions concerning the parking meter ordinance? Not hearing any. Next old business is ordinance number 229, the Longwood University golf cart ordinance. And I believe we have added the strobing light to the back or the top of the golf cart. Is that accurate, Mr. Davis?
Yes, sir. It's in, it's number 6 under,
Yes,
under
number 6.
15-162. It's number 6. It states that the golf carts and utility vehicles shall be marked in Longwood University markings and have a blinking strobe on the top of the vehicle or the rear of the vehicle while in operation on the designated highways.
Could I possibly suggest it be on top and not on the rear at all? Anybody got any heartburn with that?
Do they all have tops?
I mean, we gave the option because the concern from some that I heard from the last meeting was being able to, the rear being parked at the light. And then I also heard that at the top, so giving them the choice of rear or top allows for that to be seen. Because most likely, if it's at the light, you're worried about the rear end part. They have the right of way once they cross the street because the light's green, because they've got to go through the traffic signal. But yeah,
If we get deep enough in it, I could continue adding more to it, just simply for the fact that when you talk about the rear of it, they should have brake lights, but I'm not going to push that issue. I'd like to clearly see it on top. That's my thoughts.
if the majority is in consent, then it's not gone to public hearing yet because it's not till May. And so I can strike the rear part and just leave it on the top, but I just need the consensus of council.
Does anybody have any feelings on this top versus rear?
Yeah, tops.
I guess with the top, you can see from a 360 view. So I can understand that being more so instead of being blocked from the rear. So I'm good with the top.
All right. Top it is.
Thank you.
All right. Any other concerns on the golf cart ordinance at this time? Not hearing any, we'll move to new business. High Bridge Solar Conditional Use Permit. Mr. Davis?
Mayor and council, the next three items under new business is just to give you a heads up of what's going to the planning commission this month. And then inevitably comes to you after the fact. And so just wanted to get these on your radar, that these are items that will be coming to council after review and recommendation or not recommending. They still have to come to council either way from the planning commission. And so the solar project, which I've mentioned to you all in an email, I think prior, that they were having a community meeting based on the project that's off of Cedar Avenue, closest to town property, which is the wastewater treatment plant. So they're filing for a conditional use permit that'll go before the planning commission this month. And then when it comes to you, you have the final say on the conditional use permit plus a siting agreement that is used for solar projects.
Does anybody have any questions at this time?
You said there would be a public meeting. That's not a hearing, but just a community meeting.
No. They had a community meeting
Okay.
back the end of March, I believe. It
was the same night as the council meeting.
back in March at 5. I think it started at 5. It went from 5 to 7 that people could go and ask questions. Yes, any conditional use permit has to have a public hearing at the planning commission level, the town council level, and then you get the final approval.
I know that was the second Wednesday of the month, because I remember it, to Mr. Davis's point, it started an hour before our meeting. Did anyone attend that meeting from town or? Mr. Weiss did. Yeah. I know I had planned on it, but then got caught up. I was just curious what kind of participation they had.
Staff did not. We've
Yeah.
been dealing with them for quite some time. We know what the project is, but it was more for them to speak to the community if anybody had any concerns or questions and that type of thing, that they were there to give face to them.
Do we know if there were any concerns expressed or anything? Do we have any idea? Could you, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
To my knowledge, Mr. Weiss was the only community member that showed up. And they gave him an overview of the project, and I don't believe he had any questions at that time.
Thank you. Any other questions concerning that? Like I said, like Scott said, these will go, or Mr. Davis said, these will go to the planning commission and then come to us following that, so. Next item, residential sidewalks, proposed zoning ordinance amendment.
So we have currently in the code, and it's been this way in the subdivision section, that requires sidewalks for business districts. The residential was actually initiated from a conversation with Councilman Yolen about how could we have more walkability and have more sidewalks in future, because we can't make existing put in sidewalks. And so this just amends that part of our code to require that any new residential development has 5-foot sidewalks, part of the development plan.
All right. Any questions concerning that?
Just one question, Dr. Davis. This, as it's written, looks good. Does it address, can someone come in here and develop something like the greens with these restrictions that we have here, these 4 restrictions? I just want to make it clear that going forward, having these type of developments, walkability is a factor. So are those 4 amendments are the requirements that all we need to make sure that that doesn't slide through in the future?
Only one of those are required. So there's 4 different things listed, and it says one.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
One
is required. So the first one for any residential is going to meet the requirement, because in order to build a residential structure, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley, it has to front a street. So that in itself, the number one on that list will guarantee that they have to put in sidewalks.
Thank you. I
Yes, sir.
appreciate that.
Dr. Davis, what about the, like Radford Street? We talked about Radford Street that has a parking lot and no sidewalks on either side. Would that come under this, or would that have to be something special?
This is only for new development, that the developer is responsible for installing those sidewalks. What you're talking about on Redford Street is an individual that's requesting that we look at the town installing sidewalks along one side of Redford to allow for that parking lot, when it's being used, to have access to the crosswalk. So that will be something that we can look at this year, as I shared with that business owner, that we would not be able to engineer that ourselves because of the slope. of that area at Redford and Griffin. And any new sidewalk has to be have ADA capabilities and requirements and meet. And that slope at the end would need to be determined how someone in a wheelchair or other method is there going to be a switchback there, and what does that cost look like to construct, to actually put in a sidewalk there or not?
Where does that, I'm sorry. So where does that leave? Is that up to the property owner to do the engineering and figure out how that's best going to be accomplished?
That's on us.
Because it's on town property.
At this point in time, we've already taken over the right-of-way in the street, whereas a new development, when we required, it's on the developer because we haven't taken over those, that infrastructure yet.
I understand. Thank you.
All right, any other questions concerning sidewalks? All right, next up is fences, proposed zoning ordinance amendment concerning fences. Mr. Davis?
So I was surprised when I first came here that we didn't have any ordinances regarding fences. And then I guess I learned that maybe most people police themselves here. But recently, we have had an issue on Longwood Avenue where someone has placed a privacy fence from the rear of the yard all the way to and within the town's right-of-way of a, would you estimate 6-8 foot privacy fence?
Let's say, yeah.
7?
6 to 7 foot privacy fence.
Privacy fence that is now blocking the view of the neighbor from pulling in and out of their driveway. And so it made me revisit the lack of us having anything other than to say that it is a safety hazard from a driver standpoint. So we do have some standing in that fashion. But other than that, the town has no standing if somebody wanted to build a compound and have a 10-foot privacy fence all around their house in any part of the town. And so most cities and towns, I'm not saying all, my former locality had a fence permit, for fence ordinance, which you had to get a permit to put up a fence. And some of them are more defined than others about even what the front yard fence can look like. Ours we're proposing is just height-wise, not what it's made out of or anything like that. It doesn't have to be picket or anything. It just that from the front line of the house, it could only be 4 feet tall. Still has to have sight distance. And then the rear can be no more than 8 feet tall, which will give you privacy.
How about the sides? The side yards?
So anything from the front plane, so the very front corners of the house, back, side, and rear would be 8 feet. That is. Then from the front plane to the street, well, not even the street, but to our right-of-way would be 4 feet.
Anything behind the front yard side setback would be 8.
Maximum of 8.
And all districts have a 35-foot either from the street right-of-way or the center of the street setback.
And then there's language in there, if you saw, that will, talks about corner lots, because you on a corner lot, there is some additional visibility for traffic that it may be a little bit further back.
Has anyone notified because I remember when I called you about this, has anyone notified the owner of the driveway that they can't see that we were looking into this? I mean, I told them that we would, but anybody give them an update yet?
I'm not sure if we've contacted the
We've contacted the owner of the fence. We
Yeah, you
Well, can
said
we-
you had brought that to our attention, and I thought you were communicating with the actual homeowner that was.
We would look into it, but I'm saying for the update, can we contact them to let them know what we're proposing?
Sure.
Yeah, well, thank
Can I
you.
ask you a question? Is the homeowner and the neighbor, are they like bickering with each other? Is that why
I don't mind saying that the one person, in other words, is putting this fence up so they don't have to see their neighbor.
so
Because
we're developing an
because-
ordinance just because of that? That's ridiculous.
No, it draws attention because this could be a much bigger issue down the road of anybody could put any size fence anywhere in their yard, and there's nothing we could do about it.
We've answered multiple calls this year about fence questions, you know, asking if there were a height limit, you know, what material can I use? How tall can I build my fence? It's been more than a handful of calls in the last year.
Yeah, I will say most, like if you just Google how high of a fence can I build, what you'll see is a litany of folks saying, contact your local town government, contact your local county government, find out what their permit system is, find out what their ordinance is, because most of them do have one. I think this issue in particular, and I noticed it because I do drive Longwood Avenue a fair bit, and I remember thinking if that person coming out, like if you're going up Longwood Avenue, passing Roshis, passing the eye doctor, and that person who's on the uphill side, the neighbor, I suppose, is that neighbor? Or is it the homeowner?
The
I don't
homeowner's
know
on the
who's who.
higher side.
The homeowner's on the higher side. Then the one on the lower side, if they're gonna pull out of their driveway, they can't see the incoming traffic from up the hill. So you're pulling out into traffic with no visibility of who's oncoming traffic. And that feels like a public safety issue at that point.
And that was a concern from the property owner. It said that when they back out, you know, they can't see because you have the pole and you have the fence. You have maybe 6 to 8 inches in between trying to see traffic.
Well, I don't mind the part of obstruction of pedestrian or vehicular, the need of that, but, we need to make it very clear that, we're not impeding the rights of the homeowners or putting, fences up if they want to, and they have to adhere to all of this. I mean, I don't want to get so picky on doing stuff. I mean, that's my whole thing.
I was looking at it, and my thoughts are along hers in the sense that there may be houses where they don't have a choice. I don't like dogs on chains, and I don't know whether there's an ordinance about it or whatever, but I don't want to go down that road. But if the only option they have is a fence in their front yard, and they've got a Great Dane, a 4-foot fence is not going to stop a Great Dane. They're going to go over it if they want to, and they would need to be able to have the opportunity to have a higher fence. And if their front yard is the only place that they can put a fence, then I don't want to limit the height of that fence. And that's my feeling on it in that sense. I agree with Sally with the impeding the view, and if that guy's fence is on the town right of way or the property or whatever, then that, we have to, whatever we can do on that would be great. But I don't think having a fence that's 4 feet tall in the front is, I don't care. Their neighbors might.
Yeah, we're not trying to impede any property owner ability. It's more of saying this is a standard or I guess what I would say is I would not want to be in a neighborhood that everybody had, or not everybody, but my neighbor had a 6-foot privacy fence in their front yard. I don't think that would bode well for the aesthetics. I mean, I'm sure if somebody did that in different neighborhoods in the community, you all would hear a lot of griping if somebody put a 6-foot privacy fence in their front yard. And without any regulation, there is nothing we can do.
Can you see over I'm just trying to envision this, can you see over a 4-foot fence if you're sitting in a low car? I mean, you pulling out, even 4 foot is rather high. Can you,
The key for that is that it can't be, it still cannot obstruct, so it can't be in our right of way. You've got to be from the setback, which is
I get
35,
that. What is the right of way typically?
35 feet
35?
from the center of the
For the
street,
center, yeah.
Or
right?
the right of it, depends on the size of the street.
If it's 50 or 60 foot.
So we would be incumbent on the town to make sure that if we give a permit, that they're.
It's just
they're
like
not
any other
building it.
permit. If they get a shed, they got to get a building permit.
Right,
So
but
they
I'm-
would then get a fence permit to get a fence installed.
They would have to get a zoning permit for a structure.
Yeah, we just have to make sure that they're not
Fence or shed.
bringing it out any closer than 35 feet from the center of the road.
Yeah, it would be just like any other, it would be a plot plan, just like when they do a shed, like it's not full-scale drawings, I mean, we could print off our GIS and they say, put a square, here's my shed, it's, 10 feet from the property line in the rear, it's this many feet on it, drawn, the hand drawn, and then we go and make sure that it's accurate and we approve it when it's built.
Thank you for that explanation. Thanks.
Do you have any other discussion at this time concerning fencing?
So all of these, as I said, Mayor, go to the planning commission this month for them to decide whether they want to make any recommended changes or anything like that, or make a recommendation or not recommend to council. And then ultimately, you can you can agree with them if they recommend or override if they don't recommend.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but planning commission meetings are the third Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. in these chambers. You can attend, you can watch online. They're also streamable. So you can keep up on what's happening as far as the ordinances are concerned in the planning commission process before they come to council. All right.
Can I ask one question since we're on fences?
Yes, sir.
In my ward, it's a resident that want to put an awning onto his house. And he said he was told that he couldn't put it on his house, even though it'll still be on his property because of the zoning. So
Correct, because it's attached to his house, so it's part of his structure, and your house has to have a setback from the road where the front is. There's a minimum setback of a front yard, and so it's part of the main structure. The awning would be, so he's going to be closer to the roadway than than he can be by the zoning ordinance.
We're just talking, we're talking about ordinances about same thing we're talking about here, right? What is the frontage of your house and how far is it from the center of the road? Right.
We don't have all that in front of
Yeah,
us
right.
for this, we weren't prepared
Right.
for this question or
Right.
discussion, but, the current zoning ordinance is that, it was this way in the old ordinance and this ordinance is you have to be a certain distance, the front of your house from, it's a front yard setback is what it's called. And so when you add something to the front of your house that's structurally to it, then you're decreasing that minimum distance that's required.
If you happen to be lucky enough and your house is far enough back, then you can probably put
You
one on.
possibly could.
But if you're not, then of course, then you've got to face the consequences.
Right.
What if it was hypothetically, sorry, what if it was a freestanding, not attached to the house? Is that setback still apply?
Then it would be an accessory structure, and an accessory structure has its own requirements, which we don't have off the top of our head right now.
what about the awning that comes out and you can let back in? You know, the you know, the ones that got it. Yeah.
But when it's not retracted, it doesn't meet the ordinance.
Just trying to, okay.
Get them to put a tree up, Mr. Reed. Get them to put a tree
So
up.
could theoretically, they could put up the awning as long as it stayed retracted.
Or possibly halfway, something like that.
That's true, plant trees. Urban heat mitigation.
The tree might grow too big.
All right, any other questions on fences? Not hearing any. All right, we will move to the town manager's report. Mr. Davis, what do you got for us?
Zoning change also, we're looking at, want some feedback from you all, and this is just, if you want us to look into it any further, and then we'll look at asking the planning commission. We also have a landowner that is in a residential district that has a parking lot adjacent to their property. And they would like to have food trucks in that parking lot, but it's zoned residential. And under the code, it does not allow for any type of, food trucks can only be allowed, or only allowed in business districts on private property. And so the only solution for this is that to where it's not totally allowed everywhere in a residential district, is that the council could, and the planning commission could recommend that we amend the zoning ordinance to allow for a conditional use permit to be reviewed and or granted and or not granted, depending on the circumstances, to allow food trucks in residential districts on residential property. Now, that means that's for any residential, R1, 2, 3, or 4, and then you would have to decide who gets a conditional use permit and who doesn't. And so I just open that up to see if that is something that you want us to continue looking at further, and have a discussion with the planning commission of their thoughts on making that in the future as well.
Yeah, you said one thing, private property. So if this person owned this piece of property on the other side of the road, isn't that private property? Or
Well, yes. In other words, like, we're in a business district, the town is.
Right.
But food trucks cannot be on public property. In other words, we don't allow food trucks to go park in the plaza. It has to be on business property. So in other words, yes, it would have to be on private property, which is the property that the owner owns, if we did it also by conditional use permit in residential districts.
I'm concerned by it. Just from the way our zoning ordinances are written, it talks about protecting against dissimilar uses. And I know this would be trying to amend that, but I think I'm concerned about it.
Is there a way that the zoning could be crafted that, in this particular case, because this property sits right on Griffin Boulevard, there's not such dissimilar uses going on in that area? There's a barber shop, and the university's right across the street. In other words, is there a way to craft it so that if a property like this could be utilized for a commercial purpose, if it's close to like a highway, that's 15, right? Running Griffin Boulevard is 15 running through town. Instead, or a major arterial road or something, if it was if it was next to it, they could apply for a conditional use. But if you were to go back 2-3 more blocks and you were near the rugby field or something, that commercial application couldn't even be approached.
I'm not sure, I'd have to look at that, Mr. Yolen. I'm not sure that we can determine based on where you are in a residential.
Well, because then you're breaking up residential into a mixed use. I mean, you're changing the zoning.
Well, he's
Wouldn't you
saying,
have to?
I'm assuming you're saying leave it residential. Or are you saying rezone the property? Because I don't think we can just say in the zoning ordinance, that's gonna be a legal question more than, for me, that we can say only residential properties on
Major thoroughfare.
arterial thoroughfares are allowed. I don't know the answer to that question. If your question is rezoning different parcels, you can't rezone, you can't spot zone one piece of property and the rest of them are residential. Now, if council wanted to, they could rezone that whole from High Street. Ms. Caton would be very happy. If you rezoned from High Street to Main Street on Griffin Boulevard, that whole row of lots, and you rezone that to business, some type of business district, you could definitely do that, because then it's not spot zoning. But what are the neighbors on Hill Street behind that, or whatever street, what are their comments? Because we already heard some of those come out for the convenience store at the old Scope building, and they didn't want, and that was a conditional use permit application, and they didn't want that and that's on Griffin Boulevard, on that stretch that I'm talking about.
I understand. So, yeah, and I don't want to get into trying to rezone the entire Griffin Boulevard. It's just that it's already sort of spotty with businesses being right next to houses and other places on Main Street with the Burger King right next to that rental house that's right up there. I'm just trying to think of a creative solution that could help that
Some of those
area.
businesses, I think, were there before probably the zoning ordinance in 73, like the funeral homes and things like that. So, you know, some of those are there that wouldn't be there now. The barber shop wouldn't be there now, the funeral homes wouldn't be there now, some of those things.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of part of the character of Griffin Boulevard, is that there is a little mix going on there. It's a small town, and, you know, neighborhood shops or we don't have any neighborhood butchers anymore, maybe someday. But, you know, that's kind of adds to the character of the small town charm, I think, so.
The question
My question-
I have is, one second.
Go ahead.
The question I have is, now, this is not a permanent business. This is something coming in like twice a week, and then it's gone. So, can you answer that?
The food truck is only allowed currently in a business district on private property. You would have to have some mechanism to allow it in a residential zoning district.
So my question is, now that you're finished. So if I wanted to have a pizza party for my children and they were at a young age and I wanted to hire a food truck, that would not be allowed on my property.
No, sir.
It's something we need to look into then.
A number of years ago, I'm sorry. When I was on the planning commission back in the day, we had up on the extended part of Lee Drive that goes as far, I guess, west. Somebody wanted to put a commercial kitchen in their basement, and the neighbor next door said that aroma of food, well, they were doing it actually without any permission. The aroma of that food just permeated the neighborhood. I mean, I'm just saying that if it was something that you liked, that might be good. If it's something that you didn't like, it might not be so good. I'm just saying that's an infringement of some sort too, is if you're experiencing food aromas into your neighborhood, you may not like that. Small point, but we denied that at the.
Yeah, so I mean, think about it, and I can come back to you. I just need to know how you want. We can attempt to. I mean, what Mr. Hunter is saying with a conditional use permit, you can regulate it for a 1 day for your kid's birthday party. You just got to plan it months ahead of time to get the conditional use permit.
I can go along with that one.
And it can be for, only, so a conditional use permit, you can set the time, the day, all the parameters you want. Just know it's going to be the ability to be done in any residential district. So but at the end of the day, with a conditional use permit, you have the final say.
We'll come back to you.
Well, it's something to mull over, right? Because yes, anytime you grant in a conditional use permit, you're opening up the precedent that you're going to potentially do so in lots of other locations residentially. And so it just opens that door up and creates a lot of decision points potentially. Okay.
I got one more.
You got one more?
Yep.
Oh, good.
Next month, I hope to bring a discussion item, another one that was initiated by Mr. Yolen. There's a code in the Code of Virginia that allows for towns to work with and get approval by the circuit court to have a land bank entity remediate, instead of the condemning and tearing down of structures, residential structures. There's a method that allows for a land bank entity, a nonprofit entity, to come in, and I don't want to get too far into it, but allows them to take control of the property to remediate and restore. And so it's another potential tool, if you will, instead of tearing down structures. And so Mr. Elder is looking at reviewing something that we've received, and so hopefully next month we'll be able to, at a work session, to go over that in a little bit more detail and what that all looks like and what that ordinance would be. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I think per other discussions, putting more tools in the toolbox to get to solutions is a pretty good idea. Do we have any other, I'll go around the room, comments from council? Mr. Hardy, Mr. Hunter, Mr. Yolen?
Yes, I have to report that roughly 8 years ago, I broke the law here in town, and I had a food truck in my driveway 2 years in a row for a party that I threw, and I never permitted it, and I'm really sorry about that.
If we can come up with a fine mechanism retroactively.
We discussed that
That's
already. I don't think we can do retroactive fines. I'm sorry.
Mr. Parrott,
I'm fine.
Mr. Dwyer.
That was somewhat of a confessional then, right? Yeah. I think,
Mr. Reed. All right, not hearing any, I don't have any comments at this time, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it.